All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. My name is Todd Huntley, and I'm the director of the National Security Law Program here at Georgetown. Welcome to Georgetown Law. We're very happy that you braved the iced sidewalks in the cold to come join us today. I think you're going to really enjoy our discussion. So, as you saw the title, right, we're going to speak about Jamaica's national security issues in the region, as well as U.S. and Jamaican security cooperation. As most of you probably know, Jamaica occupies a strategic position in the Caribbean, right, both geographically and politically. It sets aside major trade crossroads in the Caribbean. It sets astride an important strategic access point to the Panama Canal. It has the largest English-speaking population in the Caribbean. It has more than 1 million citizens living in the United States. I think some of you have joined us today. Thank you. And the trade between Jamaica and the United States exceeds $3 billion a year. So very close and important ties between our countries. Jamaica is a leader in regional and international security organizations, such as the Organization of American States, the Caribbean Community, and the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative. The U.S. and Jamaica has a long history of security cooperation, particularly in the fight against illegal narcotics and transnational criminal organizations. U.S. and Jamaican Defense Forces conduct joint training, and especially relevant to the Washington, D.C. area, the District of Columbia National Guard has a 25-year partnership with Jamaican Defense Forces. So lots of connections. Some of you may have heard or read the new National Defense Strategy. I think that places even more importance on the topics we're going to discuss today. Right? The new defense strategy is placing more strategic importance on both homeland defense of the United States itself, as well as regional security in the Western Hemisphere. So it looks like, President Trump and the administration are placing even greater emphasis on these security ties and security issues in the region of where Jamaica plays a very important role. We are very fortunate today to have with us His Excellency Major General Antony Anderson, Major General retired. There's really nobody better situated than the ambassador to talk about these issues. Right before his diplomatic posting, he was the police commissioner for the Jamaican Constabulary Force. He was the first national security advisor to the Prime Minister and Cabinet. And prior to that, he had a long and distinguished career in the Jamaican Defense Force, ultimately ending up as the Chief Defense Staff Officer, the senior military officer in the Jamaican Defense Force. His leadership has played a key role in the development of Jamaica's national security policy and the advancement of international security partnerships. Ambassador, thank you very much for being with us today and for sharing some of your thoughts.
Hey, you're very welcome, and it's good to be here. And certainly I recognize that I'm among lawyers and people with legal minds, which is great. I'm not a lawyer, but I've certainly been involved in policy and in also the development of law as a consequence of policy, security policy.
Thank you very much. I should say that we're going to have a short discussion, and then we'll open up the floor for questions. So be thinking of your questions for the ambassador, please. Sir, for those of us who may not be so familiar with the national security structure in Jamaica and of the Jamaican government, could you perhaps just give us a brief overview of who the important players are, who the important organizations are, and their role in security?
Okay, very quickly. So in the narrow sense of security, you have a Ministry of National Security and Peace. That peace part has recently been added. Traditionally, it was the Ministry of National Security. And prior to that, interestingly enough, it was the Ministry of National Security and Justice, where both of those were in the same ministry. That split off a few years later into national security as one thing and justice as a separate ministry. And then most recently, and that used to in the past oversee defense as well. Most recently, defense has been split off into a separate ministry, and the peace part added on to the Ministry of National Security, which is where we are now. Under the Ministry of National Security is, of course, the police force, the correctional service, the passport, immigration, and citizenship agency, the regulatory authorities for private security, and also for firearms licensing and all of that. Everything around the civilian ownership of firearms comes under that. On the other side, defense, the Minister of Defense always has been the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister generally takes that role across administrations as Prime Minister and Minister of Defense. And that is basically a consequence of how the Defense Act that guides all things military is framed, that enshrines certain powers and responsibilities in the Minister of Defense. And it was successive prime ministers have thought it better that they retain that as the chairman of the defense or chairperson of the defense board. So it has a legal and policy and structural basis why that is the case.
Great. Thank you, sir. I mentioned in the introduction that you were the first national security advisor to the Prime Minister and the cabinet. I guess, how or why did that position, why was it established? And how did you, you get to create the position, you're the first one, right? Yeah. So how did you set that up?
So, okay, firstly, so it was really that, and I started that in 2016. In 2016, the administration that is still there came to power. And the Prime Minister had a particular interest in security, in that they saw security and the ability to keep your as a first order of business as a government, to provide and create safety and security for the population. It therefore needed mechanisms to be able to guide that policy process to create security. So that policy development would be done through the National Security Council. It was an organ that was always there, but it didn't have the underpinnings of an office that really took on the responsibility of taking the decisions of council and making them real, of converting the conversations in council into policy direction, and then into strategies that can allow those policies to become real, and give it to the executing agencies in a way that they could translate into actual operational activities.
Great, thank you. You've had, other than being the first national security advisor, you've obviously held several very important senior roles in security. How did you develop an interest in national security? Why did you choose this career?
So, leaving college, I did engineering in college, and I was telling the team earlier on that growing up, my father always used to say, whatever you want to do, you can do anything you want as long as you're good at it. Just make sure that you do it well. And that guided things until I reached the point where I was deciding what to do in college. And then he said, do anything you want as long as it's engineering. So I ended up doing engineering. But what I really wanted at that stage of life was to pursue an adventure. I wanted an adventure that did things that didn't confine me to an office or confine me to a very sort of, to the mundane. Not to say that anybody else's thing is mundane. I'm not saying that. It's just I was seeking an adventure. As a young man seeking an adventure, I ended up in the military. It suited me and I suited it. And it allowed me to see many things and do many things. As anybody who knows who served, there's such a wide range of things. Almost anything you can do outside, you can do in. And the rest became history, as I see that.
As I mentioned to you, I served in the US Navy
Right.
for 23 years, and I can certainly relate to that.
Yes.
Which of your positions did you find especially interesting and rewarding?
So I found, so there was a position before I got to that stage where I had responsibility for security, or to deliver security in the CARICOM region in 7 countries simultaneously, to deliver security around the hosting of Cricket World Cup 2006, 2007. It gave me an opportunity. So at the time I was a lieutenant colonel, just heading into full colonel at that time. They needed, the heads of government of CARICOM said, listen, we're close to this event and our security arrangements aren't tight enough. They're not working. We need somebody to do it. Somebody thought it was a good idea to throw me at it. So they did that. And I got a multinational team. And all of a sudden, you're moving from what was really the operational level to the strategic level. So tomorrow, before I speak to my boss in the military, and tomorrow I'm speaking to ministers and prime ministers. And all of a sudden, I'm drinking from a fire hose of information to deliver something within 7, 8 months, 6, 7 months. So that was a very rewarding thing that we actually got that done and done well. And it's more of a reflection on the team and how we did that, the planning, the interactions with the political class that I hadn't had previously, and understanding how they think and what drives their thinking, and how, as they calibrate their own worldview, they're thinking wider than technocrats normally think. There's a bigger picture that they're looking. And it gave me exposure to that bigger picture as well. And I believe that informed everything else that I did. So that was particularly challenging, and that's why it became particularly rewarding. Of course, as Chief of Defense, it's a big thing. After 30 years you reach that level, it's allowed you to reach out beyond the borders of Jamaica. You had arrangements and friends across the world as you tried to get significant things done for the region, for Jamaica, and sought partnerships. Then, of course, Commissioner of Police. All of them have their own challenges and their own rewards. So it's hard to say this one, but I can put each thing is a platform for development that springboards you to the next.
Okay, excellent. And you mentioned about, having these connections now through the Defense Forces outside of Jamaica. You mentioned to me that you're a graduate of the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth. In fact, I believe you're a member of the Hall of Fame of the Command and General Staff College. So how did that experience, what did you think of that experience? How did that benefit you in your career?
So, in Jamaica, we tend to do a lot of training outside as well. So we do training inside, but also we tend to run our people through as much international exposure as possible. So I started sort of life in the military at Sandhurst in the UK, and had done that side. I've been doing things with the Canadian forces and so on. So when we got to the level where we're doing that level work and operational staff work and so on, and command, so I wanted to do it in the US. And the reason why is scale. If you want to understand scale of doing this profession of arms, you'd have to really look at the US as the most likely and feasible option to see scale in action, to understand the scale of logistics of operations required. So it was good for me in that respect, but also it was an opportunity to make a whole bunch of international friends and also U.S. friends.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. As we've mentioned, you've had a very long and distinguished career in national security in Jamaica. How has the security situation in Jamaica changed during the course of your career?
Well, so that's a long time, right? So we've had some sort of persistent problems over time. I believe I believe it not just in Jamaica, but we're also a part of what happens regionally and globally and so on. And so for quite a few years, we have a problem with violent crime. Early days, there was a sort of a nexus with political competition and violence. That changed. It then became transnational organized crime and violence later on. And so we've seen that has been persistent, or was quite persistent over time. Now, step back a bit from that. So we saw what it allows us to do. We see we're impacted always by what happens in the US. We're right here. We're an hour and a half from Miami. And we have a huge diaspora here, as was said earlier, and so on. So we're impacted by US action. So I remember clearly the shift, for instance, after the Cold War, the shift towards an interest in the Western Hemisphere right afterwards. And what went from a Cold War to now a war on drugs. If people remember that was the genesis right after that. And that war on drugs, if you remember, first drug czar, Barry McCaffrey, former military guy, 4-star, became the drug czar sometime around 91, 92, yes, I believe it was, where the peace dividend of the end of the Cold War would translate into more focus on this hemisphere. And then came the invasion of Kuwait and the first Gulf War and so on. And so the expeditionary nature, the view, that distance view became another, we went through another cycle of that, the first Gulf War. And then post that, you have another drift back to Western Hemisphere view, and then 9/11. 9/11 pushed everything back to what was deemed to be the source of threat, and the calibration of the understanding of threat to the United States shifted at 9/11 significantly, and then that explained the next 20 years or so of action.
So, I mentioned the change in the latest national defense strategy. Mm-hmm. So do you see this focus once again on the Western Hemisphere just as kind of the nature of things, the cyclical change and, security issues, or what do you think of this?
Well, it's definitely a shift back towards an interest in this side of the world, in the Western Hemisphere, because as a small island with big partnerships, with a big partner, you as you say, you feel, we notice, and in the cycle of this, when the U.S. interest shifts. So it has shifted back now to the hemisphere at this point in time, and that's we're in early days. The National Defense Strategy came out a week ago. The National Security Strategy came out a few weeks before, and so although we've gone through it, the actual outworking of it in detail, right, where it comes from that strategy down to actions, specific actions, is something that we're looking at with interest. But having seen the cycle, it's not as, it's not the first time we're seeing this, that there's a shift.
Right. No, I think that's an excellent perspective, because I think you have a lot of people in the United States without that perspective that see this as being kind of an earth-shattering break from, U.S. defense policy and strategy.
Well, a few things have happened on this rotation. I don't think you've had ever a time where information moves as fast, so pervasively, and misinformation moves at the same speed. So our just to take the information and decide what is true and what's not, what's real and what's not, is a challenge that we all face. Mm-hmm. And almost whatever you look at becomes your feed. And the algorithms of commerce feed you what is likely to keep you watching and watching the ads that come in between. So it's an interesting thing. And if you start to watch something else, you'll see a feed change, and then everything is designed to support your position. And it doesn't matter what position you take, there's enough information supporting it, which means that we have to be circumspect in how we get information, how we fact check things, and how we respond, so that we as officials can communicate what we deem to be, or as best as possible, what we seem to be legitimate positions. Mm-hmm. It means that we have to be, we operate a little slower than the next tweet. We have to be a little more deliberate, because we can't afford for our people to lose confidence that what we tell them is you can, bank on.
Right. Right. And that's, a challenge, because time is of the essence when you're dealing in the information environment, right? And I think it was Mark Twain said, right, a lie is halfway around the world before the truth even gets its pants on.
And he was saying that then.
Yes.
And
so I'm sure it's a challenge for you, but also for your staff, some of whom are here, yeah, right, in monitoring that situation and then, preparing responses to that. So,
yeah. And how do you create it? Because one of the things that you create, because ultimately everybody's trying to create a better thing for their society, for their people, no matter whatever your position. Your methodologies may shift and change, but largely, I believe that's what people are after. And so, our actions and how we respond always has to have that in mind, and understand that the person on the other side of the conversation is not necessarily seeking a different outcome. There's a different method.
Yes. Thank you. That's a very important point. So what do you think Jamaica's most challenging security threat is now?
So it's transnational organized crime that plays out in violence. That is the largest threat on the man-made side, and natural disasters on the on acts of God.
Yes,
particularly hurricanes for us, and the possibility of earthquakes. Those are our threats to our safety, our security as a nation. Of course, we've been doing a lot on that.
Yes. I mean, it was just a few months ago when Jamaica was devastated by, I think, Hurricane Helene. I guess how did that affect the security situation, and how was the U.S. response to that?
Okay, so that's like a human security issue. So our ability to respond in those circumstances. I mean, this is like one of the three largest hurricanes since they've been recording hurricanes in Jamaica. We are now, but we got a great diaspora as well. They just stepped up to the plate. Never, certainly for the people in the room or on the diaspora. But also, we had put things in place as a country to ensure the security under those circumstances. Financial, 5 layers of financing around disaster recovery mechanisms and response mechanisms. So we are in recovery mode now, which is only 2 months, 3 months later, where nearly our electrical grid is nearly back up, and so on. So we're moving. So the creation of a robust security architecture doesn't just deal with crime; it also deals with natural disasters. It's the same response. So the communication mechanism, the ability to respond, the agility, the flexibility, the way you plan, it could be for crime-related internal security operations, or it could be for a disaster. You pivot, but you have the capacity, and you've invested in the training for those people who are involved in first response. They are capable of being flexible, because they've been not exposed dogmatically, but exposed and trained to be flexible, to understand things, to be capability-based, that you can apply to different.
Okay, great. And I'm sorry, I think it was Melissa, not Helene. Helene was,
it's Melissa. Yes.
Helene was the one that hit North Carolina up
Yeah.
here just slightly before Melissa hit. Yeah. No, and I understand the lingering effects of disasters like that. The county I live in rural Virginia, was hit by a hurricane in 1969 and killed about 160 people. And the people who live in that county still remember that and are still, anytime we get a forecast of a storm like that, people get worried. So
in terms of the U.S. response to it, it was perhaps the fastest response I've seen. And I've seen this for a long time. I'm not just saying that. When the airports opened, like a day later, US was in. They were in with urban search and rescue out of LA and out of Fairfax County. And they were in with air support so that we could get supplies in to cut off communities and so on. And the DART, disaster, response team were there to assess, to see what could happen. So, I mean, in terms of the response, it was immediate. And it was, as you say, it was a layered response. It wasn't just a federal response, but it was a federal and local response where people stepped up. Mm-hmm. And then, so that's from the US sort of government, whether it's local or federal government. But in terms of the actual support beyond that, it's been really overwhelming. Overwhelming from a US perspective. Huge response from the diaspora, but also from just persons who are that way inclined, and through the large organizations like GEM and so on, those global ones, massive ones, they were in Jamaica immediately.
Well, that's good to hear.
So maybe we had a rehearsal in Beryl, so we got really good at it. I believe what happened with Beryl the year before caused us to put many things in place that stood us in good standing for this much more challenging and difficult service.
Yeah, no, thanks. You mentioned that most challenging threat is transnational organized crime. How do you in Jamaica balance the need to provide security for citizens while at the same time protecting their civil liberties and their rights?
All right, so first thing, so you ground everything that you do. So all right, let me take it from a different country. In the work of development and transformation of our police force, there were three things that we put as foundational to the culture we wanted in the force and how we ground everything. The first one, that the Jamaican Constabulary Force would be a force for good. That became one of the things. And it's repeated now. It's something, it's on everything, force for good. What that does is when a young police officer leaves training school and goes out there, the first scenario they're going to meet is the one they weren't trained for. Okay, so yeah, that life's like that. So you're going to run into something that you perhaps was not one of the scenarios that you got in training school. So you have to be guided by something, and that we want to create something to guide it. So what does good look like in the circumstance? So you start to think about it. So the force for good. The second one is rule of law. And it's not necessarily in this order, but rule of law. So if you're a law enforcement entity and you're not grounded in rule of law, then you have a problem. You know, so what guides you? Law. Suppose the law doesn't quite deal with your circumstances. You change the law. But as a force, rule of law. So nationally, rule of law is important, but it's also important that the law evolves, that you're looking at its relevance, and that you're doing that the laws keep up with the reality of your society. So if your laws aren't protecting you, then the risk is that you find other ways of protecting yourself, and the law gets diminished. So rule of law is a critical one. The third one is respect for all. And so when you conduct yourself, or the business of state is conducted with respect for its citizens, and there's this idea of respect. Once you're doing that with the smallest, then you go to level. And so you ground everything in these tenets. So what does that mean in your life? That is what you teach. And so in the execution of things, that's the policy you put in place. And so it drives everything. Does it mean that you won't have incidents and acts? Of course you will. It's people we're dealing with here. But what is the institutional framework for how you do things? What do you include in your training? Circumstances, and how does that guide the actions and how you conduct business? Because at the end of all of this, what you want is a peaceful society. Now, you know, as we discussed this before, what do we mean by peaceful society? So here's the thing. Peaceful society doesn't mean that the people in the society are docile. That's not what that means. It means that competition doesn't have to become conflict. That the things that take you to the peak of it, the things that make us, for instance, in Jamaica, essentially Jamaican, is that we don't roll over easily. We don't just accept things as they are. We go do things. We have an expectation. And I tell you, I mean, we watch our you know, obviously Olympics is a big time for us as Jamaicans, or the Jamaicans here, no, because we have certain expectations. So one of the places where we do it, the halfway tree, they're big billboard, and they play the race, and you know, people are watching this Olympics final. Jamaica is in the race, and the race is done. We got a silver medal. Depression falls because we got a silver instead of a gold. So whether it is that, or us as a country being one of, if not the first country that put sanctions on South Africa with respect to apartheid and all that, Jamaica has featured consistently. The Constitution of Kenya was written on the typewriter of one of our attorneys who actually defended Jomo Kenyatta at that time, and so on. So we have a history of not rolling up. We don't want to lose that. But we don't want to take that so far that we end up in conflict with each other, destroying our peace, instead of taking that energy that has now become conflict and putting it into productivity and development and taking a collective movement as a country as we seek our economic sovereignty along with our political sovereignty, and that we can chart our own way in the world.
So, and the issue of information and disinformation is making that even more difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, Jamaica has seen a great success in cutting the murder rates. I think last month saw the lowest number of January murders in like 25 years.
Yes.
How's Jamaica doing that?
So we come back. So this is on last year's. So we had a reduction of 40+% last year. This year, this month, there's been a 50+% reduction and so on. So what you're seeing is the end result of focus, of political focus, because everything starts with political policy. Focus, strategies, investment, because you know how it is. If a political person says they're interested in you and you don't get the budget, they're probably not as interested as you think. It's not that they're not interested in you, it's just that they're more interested in other things that got the budget. So there's a persistent and consistent investment in developing a security architecture that suits us. That we decided as a country to take on our problem ourselves. Nobody's coming from anywhere to fix your problem. You have to own it and then fix it. Once you're starting to get success, you have many parents and lots of people come on board. But if you don't know what you want, then even well-meaning people are going to deliver to you something that does not work because they don't understand your thing. So you have to be very clear where you want to go, and it requires consistent attention, political, policy, strategy, and investment perspective. You have to put leadership at every level. You have to reform and transform things that are not working. And you have to be able to stick to it through the difficult points. And you also have to empower your own people to get this done, because nobody is going to come. And you're not going to find anybody who understands your circumstances as well as you do, anywhere. So you have to leverage that against it. So in saying all of that, you have leadership applied to it throughout. You went through a transformation process. So you have a very capable police force, very capable, very modern, very modern in all sorts of respects. You know, it's a ISO 9001 force. It has technology that is the latest. The intelligence is good and all of that. And they have good leadership. And there will be a succession of leadership for years to come. And you see it at each level. So we did things differently. And we shifted and created an environment. And now what you're seeing is a result of all of that.
Oh, great, thanks. Certainly, we've talked about the U.S.'s increased focus in the Western Hemisphere. The relationship of the U.S. with many of its traditional longstanding partnerships is undergoing a sea change, as we would say in the Navy. I guess, what would you like to see the U.S.'s role in regional security be? How could the U.S. best support regional partners and achieve security for both them and the United States?
Okay, so I think for the longest time, this issue of transnational organized crime has been the thing that has impacted like everybody, including the US. So in the US, it plays out in a particular way. You know, you see the results of narcotic. And of course, narcotics is just a product. They're just a product. It has obviously medical consequences and all of that. But it's also a business. And in order to ensure that that business and those networks remain, the persons involved in the business carry out the activities through violence, quite often, or the threat of violence. And that has impacted not only the United States, but everybody along the chain. So I don't think anybody has been spared this. I mean, there are countries in the region, I'm not going to call names, that have come very close to being run by the people who are doing this business. And so that has been a feature. I'm not talking about anything recent, I'm talking about over time. Mm-hmm. It has been a significant thing because there's just ridiculous money involved, massive amounts of money involved in these processes that are there to corrupt. So there is no question that the United States is the most powerful country in this hemisphere. It's not even a matter of discussion or debate. It is. And has always, well, in recent history, retained a leadership role because it have the United States has the assets, it has the wealth, the influence to shape it. It was particularly harming for us that you had bipartisanism around things like the flow of guns going into the Caribbean. Because you could make a distinction between Second Amendment issues, which are a domestic issue. I don't believe that the Second Amendment was ever intended to run illegal firearms down into anybody's country. That was not the case. And so once you're not trespassing on the discussion in the United States, and you have something like Safer Communities Act, Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, and so on, it suggests to us, and we have convicted people subsequent to that who were running guns into Jamaica. It suggests a movement on the side of the United States to address some of that, given all of the domestic issues here. But also, it was important that we do our own legislative changes to own the problem. We have to own the problem because we have as I say, we have a huge diaspora. The vast majority integrate and add value to US society, no question about it. Huge value from the Jamaican diaspora. We have some bad guys in there too. They become part of the network. Mm-hmm. So we have to own our reality and deal with the situation as it presents itself and not look through rose-tinted glasses at something that's very real and present. Otherwise, we're doomed to continuing with the problem. The fact of the matter is that we are going to create a safe society. It's all the trends are going in that direction. It's not just murder, it's all crime. The next stage is peace. How do you have people with drive, ambition, who are willing to take on everything, but not let it turn into conflict one between each other? That's the next trick. We're soon be there.
And that's the ultimate goal of human security, right?
Yes.
So
human security.
Well, Ambassador, thank you very much for being here. Would you like to make any concluding remarks before we open it up for questions from the audience?
No, just to say, well, thank you all for coming and for your attention on what we're doing. We're doing some really innovative things, and we have to capture this model. It's something to be studied and written down and captured in writing and actually packaged, because there are many countries, whilst we're trending in one direction, a lot of countries, probably most of them are trending in the other direction. They don't need to go the long route we've gone. They can actually look at what we're doing now and kind of shortcut it. And Jamaica has, in its posture within the Caribbean, always been willing to share. And so even our centers of excellence that do training for interoperability all up and down the Caribbean and into Latin America, all of those entities are labeled Caribbean because we see us having a wider responsibility than just our own shores. What happens to our brother and our neighbors impacts us.
Thank you, sir. Well, would anybody like to ask the ambassador a question? Please step up to the microphone here. We have time for a few questions. So, all right, Anthony. Or Andrew, sorry.
All right. Thank you for coming to our exhibition. Great discussion. My name is Andrew Araby. Professor Huntley, I have two questions. Professor Huntley asked you, how do you foresee America assisting or supporting Jamaica and its ambition in the region? So I'd like to put that question and ask what you perceive Jamaica's role in assisting the U.S. Also, what you perceive Jamaica contributing to the finance transnational organizations. And I'm sure we're going to get a question or two about Venezuela.
But can we do the first one first?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, let's do one at a time. Otherwise, I'm going to forget. Right. So we have a long partnership with the U.S. As a matter of fact, you probably have more law enforcement pieces at the embassy in Jamaica than perhaps anywhere else. I mean, we have even postal service. It's one of three entities in three posts, I think, in the world that has that postal service deploys, and Jamaica is one of them. We have embeds here in the U.S. So we've been, joined at the hip for a while. Some of the big successes, like and going back years, we did major disruption of the cocaine trade going into the U.S., particularly transnationally through Jamaica, where we went from somewhere estimated around 20% of flow going into the U.S. is coming through to zero, basically. Over time, of course, as long as there's a supplier and a demand, then the people who are in the business find different routes and so on. So part of your job is to make sure that your pathway is hardened. You also have significant information sharing that we can do, but it's beyond just information, because information has cultural context. We can, give visibility to the context and the cultural context of things so that you actually get the success you're looking for, as opposed to just information. That might not mean as much to you as it means to us. So part of that is so that interoperability, that discussion was critical. As when I was Chief of Defense, one of the things that we arranged, one of the agreements we had with the US was an AXA agreement. That's an agreement that allows us to plug into the US military logistics chain, and they can do the same with us. So if you're in Jamaica, you're doing a flight, you come in, you can land, you can get fuel, and off you go. You don't need to run the credit card. And then if we're in the US, we can do the same thing. It's something that was done with NATO, I believe at the time, Colombia and Jamaica. That's it. So we're always looking for, I believe we never confine ourselves to the limit of our population or our shores. If we think of something that's big and better and bigger, we can do that. When you look for opportunities, how you can add, you find them, they turn up. But there are sometimes things you can do because you're small and agile that you can't do because you have a huge tail and it's like a monolith trying to move things. All right, second one.
About So, we hear a lot from the news here in the United States about some of the region threats. One of them being the president of Mexico, America, also Venezuela. But we don't hear a lot about Haiti very much. How is Haiti's security situation affecting Jamaicans?
Okay, so let me say before there's also before and after. So the before part of it is when Haiti's governance was in place. And that was before, as you're aware, the assassination of President Moise and all of that. There were still challenges because, unfortunately, Haiti got hit by a lot of natural disasters. They had all sorts of things, the worst being, of course, the earthquake of 2010, where had over 200,000 people die. I mean, if you think about those numbers, it's just ridiculous. And then, going in myself at the time to actually get a first-hand view of that level of devastation, it's like you set up a nuke. That's how bad it was. And then they got hit by a hurricane, and so on and so forth. So, but within the structure. So before there was a trade, guns for drugs. So there was a trade going back between Jamaica and Haiti, where guns would come into Jamaica and marijuana would head out, and other products, and there was an exchange and so on. Created a problem for us because it meant the greater availability of illegal firearms in Jamaica. Post the breakdown in governance, the issues become more one of migration, movement of people, internal displacement that leads into external displacement and so on. Now, Haiti has 11 million people. By far, it's almost double the rest of CARICOM combined. We're at 3 million. And we're 120 miles away. So Jamaica has a long history with Haiti. A history of struggle, a history of characters that are in both of our histories and so on. Haiti being first, like in the region with telephones, us turning on electricity in Jamaica, the same time as New York. We both in the same, I believe it was the same week, flipped the switch on our first electricity in both countries and so on. We did it in Black River. They did it in New York. Downtown New York, very interesting, but just such a history that we very much see Haitians as our brothers and sisters. So it impacts us on many levels. From a traditional, they're part of us, then CARICOM level, but on a security level also, it would be much better, I believe, to assist Haiti as best as possible to get back to where they want to be. And we become a part of that than allowing or taking a hands-off view of allowing what's happening there to continue without assistance to whatever we can. So even in the context of Hurricane Melissa, we still look outwards as well. So, okay.
Sure.
And private security for the national security and whatever
So right. So that's a classic case of the question that was asked about what can the US do? Now the reality is that the capacity to deal with cyber security within our country is limited. We're investing in it, we're growing it, but a lot of it has to be done through partnerships. It's just the rate of change of that world is that even when we have people who have the skill sets in terms of knowledge, because we have met persons, particularly not necessarily resident in Jamaica, but we have some, but outside of Jamaica, in the diaspora and so on, who are very knowledgeable. But just the sheer cost of creating the infrastructure to properly deal with cybersecurity at its highest level is challenging for us. And when you start to layer actors, bad actors, using AI in pursuit of their thing, it makes it even more challenging for us. You know, we've seen that. We've seen attacks here. If you remember, Google was attacked. Now, you can't find much more capacity than, say, a Google in terms of its ability to respond. I remember at the time, I don't know if anybody remembers, that they were said, no, this will be dealt with in a particular way, as opposed to getting your own team on the offensive, because that's how it would play out. But in policy here, or not just now, a cyber attack is just, or cyber defense is a part of things, and a cyber attack is just a part of the continuum of force. So it's a legitimate, a kinetic response is legitimate against a cyber attack. That has been said that's been policy here for a long, long time. From a defense perspective, we have so we move from our maritime and our air separate. So we have a maritime, air, and cyber command in the Jamaican Defense Force. So cyber is a part of that, and the ability to respond. But of course, it's a work in progress. We have to keep investing in it. We have to keep our eyes on it, but we also have to engage big partners. This is a whole new world, and it's very expensive. It's a huge commitment of resources. What we have to do is make sure that we have real smart people on this, and then see how we.
Yeah, you had a question?
Yeah, okay. That's okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. So,
Right. So, to be clear, and so that just to be clear, that the list of countries we weren't unique. It's like 75 countries, right? But the ban is on immigrant visas, as you know, green cards, basically, to be more colloquial. One of the things that we have complained about for years is the brain drain. We've spoken about it out of Jamaica. It's something that has been a feature. Oh, everybody's leaving. Well, obviously, this is going to impact that. So remittances, yes, but as we move the country and seeking to position Jamaica economically in a different space, to build entrepreneurship, to build its capacity to attract foreign direct investment, in creating a safer space and so on for Jamaicans to realize their ambitions there. Because, I mean, the truth of the matter is that some people who leave and have left, it's not because they necessarily want to leave Jamaica. It's because opportunity is where you find it. And I dare say we could attract some back if circumstances were different. So obviously, we don't want to be on any list that bans us. You know, to me, that's not a good place to be. It's for us, though, to create the opportunities and create the space for our persons who may want to migrate to be able to actually create the life they want in Jamaica. Will it affect remittances? I suspect so. Or if it continues in the long term. It's a pause at the moment. We'll see how. So we've been having obviously a lot of discussions out around this that are not public, and they're at the stage where I can't really be specific about it. But these are discussions. I dare say, migration, legal migration, is something that is a feature of life generally in the world and will continue at some point in a particular way. We're going through a patch at the moment where the focus on illegal migration is so strong, and there are so many good stories that had come out of illegal migration as well as legal migration, that sometimes the two are wrapped together. But certainly we do not encourage anyone to break the laws of the country they're going to. In the same way as if you break the laws in Jamaica, we will also deal with it in the similar way. But the contribution of the Jamaica diaspora to the US is so significant in terms of integrating in the society and building society, building the US society as valuable contributions to it. I don't know that, and this is a part, what we're talking about now is legal migration. Huh? Right. And so the discussion and what was actually said was, we need to make sure, we need to put things in place from a US perspective, this is the US position, to ensure that what is happening is above board and good. So I don't know that this will continue in perpetuity. It is the case at the moment. I'm optimistic about the future.
We have time for one last question.
Sorry, Eric Walcott.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Not very. Some of the states say that everyone.
Right.
It's talking about mindset. Should you understand?
Well, right. So remember, you don't want to conflate many things. So one is, I think the context of that was third country national acceptance. Each country has its own mechanisms for direct migration within CARICOM. And I don't know that what the country says we will not take Haitians who are applying to migrate in with the direct route. This is to do with third country nationals and all of that. I'm not going to speak for them because I'm not in their shoes. But you were talking about, sorry, the first part of what you said. Can you just remind me? So I would say, yes, right. Well, as you say, that what has been set out is very clear. The national defense strategy is clear on what is important and what is not. How that becomes operationalized is where the devil is in the detail. And we engage to find out, okay, what does that mean in real terms? What are we going to do differently? Are we going to do anything differently? How we have been cooperating and fighting these threats together for as long as any of us can remember. We've been partners forever. Does that mean we're not partners? How does that partnership manifest within the context of this new strategy? And so the point is, engagement is always critical. As long as you continue to engage, as long as you continue to the connection, we can find common ground. We have problems, and they translate across borders, and they have been impacting us all of us, big and small alike, for many years. So the policy of America First, this policy, which is a very sharply stated way of what pretty much most countries do. They don't say it, but they're actually looking about the interest of their own countries first. It doesn't mean, and I hope it doesn't mean, only. So you putting your interests first, so the people who elect you and fund you and so on, putting that first is not unusual. But understanding the impact of things that are outside of your borders on your own reality is that perhaps not only. And so it's really how we execute this. The truth of the matter is the world is changing. And I don't see it changing to change back. It will change to change forward into another paradigm. And we see it's not the first time in history. If you're a student of history, it has happened before. So we'll see.
Well, please thank me and welcome me to
The ambassador has graciously agreed to stay around for a little while if you'd like to speak with them. And also, please, we have some refreshments in the back. Please help yourselves and also take a little time to get to know each other. So thank you again for coming. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.